It's not from your perspective, okay? Because they have to affirm it. And just leave yourself open, because sometimes customers find other benefits for your product and services, but you got to go into this with an intent to provide a benefit, okay? All right, so the three basic models I wanted to highlight, and one of them we're gonna talk more than the others, is one, business to government, business to business, and business to consumer. So they are typically referred to in a lot of literature and articles as B2B, B2G, or B2C. And so one we wanted to really highlight in this episode of the boot camp is B2G, and that's marketing and sales of goods and services to the federal, state, or local government. Luckily for you, being in the nation's capital, you have a certain advantage than maybe some people in other areas of the country. You have the federal government that's really your next door neighbor. Is DC being the seat of the government. You have access to the government more so in terms of being in vicinity than maybe some other areas of the country. And then you have DC government that spends a lot of money, and we're going to talk about that. So these are sometimes an overlooked opportunity, the B2G business model. B2B is selling to other businesses, whether you're a wholesaler, selling to a retailer, or a manufacturer, selling to a wholesaler, whatever the configuration might be, your target audience is another business. And then the business to consumer is the business who's selling to an individual. And so you can have all three as part of your business and part of your strategy. The thing to remember is you're going to approach each of these models differently, because each of these models have different needs, wants, and desires. So it may not be transferable all at once, how you would apply your strategy to each one. But I want you to think seriously about the B2G, and I'm going to try to convince you of that during this session. So quick look, B2G, like I said, is sometimes an overlooked opportunity. I pulled this data yesterday. This is the amount of money the federal government spends in a day as of July the 1st, $90 billion. And federal government, state government, local government all have a goal to set aside some of their spending directly towards small businesses. The federal government is the largest purchaser of goods and services. So please really think hard about how you can consider federal and local government as part of your target audience. And with that being said, I want to highlight a strategic asset that you can use to help you get a part of that pie. DC has the Certified Business Enterprise Program, otherwise known as CBE. It is administered by the DC Department of Small and Local Business Development, and they're part of the sponsors of this bootcamp series. And so with the CBE designation, you receive preferred procurement and contracting opportunities. That means for the spending that the district makes on goods and services, part of that spending is going to be directed to small business owners. And so they have a goal of about 50% of the dollar volume of goods and services, including construction, are going to be directed to small business enterprises. The certification lasts for 3 years, so there's a lot of time that you can, make your moves to get a piece of the pie. But here's the thing. You have to get certified to get access. And then you have to network and work that certification. It's not automatic. But I will highlight the 2022 budget for DC is $17 billion. So that's a good chunk of change. And a lot of that's directed to businesses just like yours. There's several categories that you can get certified. So there's the general, just being a local business. There's the designation of just being a small business enterprise. But after that, there are even more designation. And I was even surprised DC has increased its number of categories that which you can fall under, and you can fall into more than one. The more categories you fall under, the more points you get in your proposal in putting forth a bid or being a subcontractor to a large organization that's getting government funds. So there's local, there's small, there's disadvantaged, there's those who are located in an enterprise zone. And I think many of you are if you're located in Southeast. So there's designations around the country in which the government tries to encourage government agencies to spend with businesses that are located in areas that may not get access to government funding or government contracting. So enterprise zone is one of them. And so I've provided a link in a future slide where you can go and put in your address and see if you're located in that enterprise zone. So that gets you additional points. If you're resident, DC resident owned business, a long-time DC resident owned business, as two other designations. Of course, if you're veteran owned, you do local manufacturing. And then the newest category that came about, I think it's 2020, is if you're an equity impact enterprise. And I put the definition of that from the legislation here for you to see. And it's really, you're demonstrating that you have majority ownership, but you're part of an economically disadvantaged individual group. And they give several classifications how you can fall into that designation. And so based upon some of our just very early introductions and discussions, many of you will fall into one or more of these categories, okay? So let's go through the requirements, okay? So for new applicants, somebody starting brand new, this is the basic requirements to be able to apply to get certification. Number one, the principal office must be located within the district, a physical office, okay? And the next set of standards is regard ownership. So it must be independently owned and operated and controlled. And the ownership is controlled by district-based enterprise. Sometimes other companies own other businesses. And so that business must be in the DC, or the owners themselves are made up of more 50% or more of district residents. So either one of those will make you qualify under the ownership structure. The third requirement is of the chief executive officer and or the highest level of managerial employee. They must perform their duties in the principal office located in the district, okay? So that means the business is located in the district physically, and then the work that you're doing by the managerial staff is being done in DC. And then the last standards that they require, I kind of give you some broad heading of it, is residency, assets, and gross receipts. So they basically want 50% of the employees to be DC residents, or 50% of the ownership are DC residents, or 50% of the assets of the business, including bank accounts, are in the district, or lastly, 50% of business gross receipts come from the district. So they want to make sure you're rooted in the city before they give you this kind of designation. Monica, please let me know if anybody has questions on these basic requirements. Unfortunately, I can't see the chat box, okay? So that's the basic requirements. Let me walk you through the items you will need to actually submit an application. So the DC Procurement Technical Assistance Center. So they provide one-on-one assistance for somebody who wants to pursue certification. A little bit more and more in detail than what you're getting at Congress Heights. So Congress Heights is a great starting point for you to get yourself ready to go on this track. And then when it's time to apply, you want to make sure you contact this Technical Assistance Center. So this is what these are the few bullet points they said in terms of the readiness. Number one, you not only is the business has to be established in DC, but you need to have your license established for at least 6 months, which is not a lot of time. And I was quite surprised because there was a time you had to be in business for like a number of years before you can apply for certification. So at least 6 months. You got to have a business plan, which I think I highly recommend. So I know all of you are going to have it anyway. You must have all your registration with DCRA, and that's what we talked about in our setup during our first session. So whatever legal structure you have, your tax registration, they want to make sure all of that is done and you have the documentation to prove all of that. They want to make sure you have a registered DUNS number. So Dun & Bradstreet is the business credit bureau. And so what you want to do, you want to apply for a DUNS number. It is free to request the number for your business, but it is a process. because you have to submit your information, and it's usually an online form. They like to see if you have a website. They want to see that you're an active business, and then they would award you a DUNS number, because that's the number that the government is going to use to report any credit issues if you're defaulting or anything like that. And other businesses will do the same. So usually you recommend having a DUNS number anyway, but just know to work with any local government, most of them are going to require a DUNS number. Next is a capability statement. I regard this as a little old school to still be asking for a capability statement, but the government tends to be a little old school. And this is just a summary document, usually 1 to 2 pages. You don't want to make it too long because nobody's going to read 3-4 pages on your capability. And you just outline very succinctly, your industry, what does the business do, and what are your levels of expertise that make you capable of doing a job. And so there are a lot of templates, so you can just do a simple Google, but it's usually a 1 to 2 page document. I suggest 1 page, where you identify all the core competencies of your business and all the core skills. Okay. You can have all your business licensing and registrations, and they want you to have some knowledge of government contracting. So this presentation is the start of getting up to speed on government contracting.
I have a few questions, Dr. Walker.
Sure, go right ahead.
Okay, the first question is there a cost to getting a CBE, and is it a cost for each category? Also, can being in an opportunity zone affect being a disadvantaged business?
No.
Then
you
I have
can be
two
an
more.
enterprise zone, and there's a couple other zones. There's also a hub zone, historically underutilized business zone. You could be in a zone as well as being disadvantaged, as well as being small, as well as being local. The thing is, the more points you can stack up, the more competitive your application is going to be. So the more you fall in those categories, the more points you get, the more points goes towards your application, and you get preference in terms of comparison to somebody else who might have less number of points. And I think your first question was the fee. I am not aware of a fee. I know traditionally there is not, but I will double check that.
There is.
Okay, so there is one. Okay, so I'll need to follow up exactly on what the cost parameters will be.
I'll look it up and I'll add it in the chat today.
Okay, yeah.
All right, the next question is, can you apply before the 6 months? When you talked about them wanting to see that your business has been stable for a few.
Here's the thing about the length of your business. It's hard to demonstrate your capability if you just started. So I'm even surprised by the 6 months, to be honest with you. So you really need to have a bit of a resume for your business, unless you professionally have those skills as the owner. I wouldn't recommend it, but if you have deep experience in your industry, maybe because that's been your profession the whole time, you might want to pursue it. I would probably take my time on that, but that's just me. I waited several years before even entertaining it. Because here's the thing, you don't want to mess up with a government contract, because it really does expand your revenue very quickly. They assume you have all your systems set up. You can't be getting it together on a government contract. Okay, so that's where I'll be cautious. I'll be cautious. But here again, if you have got everything together, then perhaps you might want to entertain it. Great question.
Last question so far. What was the organization name you mentioned to assist with the certification process after taking steps with CHC?
So this is it here, right up here. It is number 1, the DC Procurement Technical Assistance Center. Okay. So a lot of the DC government agencies regarding small business and development, they kind of have like set aside staff or little mini centers within the agency to really help people along with these processes. DC government, I must give them credit. They have improved tremendously with this progress. Because when I first started out, they didn't have that. It was hard to come by. So I always suggest taking advantage of any free help they offer from their staff, because their staff is always going to give you pointers that you might not get elsewhere. Any other questions there? Great question so far.
No.
Wonderful. So I also included here, they have a sample document checklist. So I added those items here so you can get a quick look. And I'll also put the actual checklist in the external folder. But I'll just run through them quickly and you get to see what kind of information and what systems about your business you need to have together. Number one, they're going to want to see documentation and documents related to the licensing and the registration. And so that means not just the certificate that says you are now an LLC and you're registered. They actually want to see the articles of organization or your operating agreement, etc. So you got to have the background material that you submitted to get approval for your registration. They also want to see current financial statements within the last 90 days. So that means, and we go over this on Thursday in far more detail. You need your balance sheet, you need a cash flow statement, and you need your profit and loss statements. Those are the three basic financial statements you will need. So of course, as we discussed in session 1, you need to have your accounting software and systems set up to generate those financial statements, because they got to be accurate. They don't need to be audited, but they got to be accurate. You need your personal and business income tax returns. So you may make sure you have those handy. You need the lease if you're renting commercial space. You need to have your organizational meeting minutes. And this is for the corporations. This is why I usually shy away from people establishing a corporation. It takes a lot more documentation. And so every corporation needs to have a board, and a board needs to have regular board meetings according to the bylaws, which you also need to provide if you start a corporation. So those of you who are S Corp or C Corp, you'll need to provide the minutes from your most recent board meeting, okay? And those minutes indicate any board actions, any items that the board is discussing and deliberating, because they want to make sure that you are exercising all the requirements for the business to be in compliance and practicing good business practices. So for, like I mentioned, for the LLC, they'll want the operating agreement if it's applicable. They'll also want your employer wage statements, wage reports, so they want to make sure you have all that information. Again, if you have employees, as I highlighted in the first session, it's a game changer. The requirements to be in business go up. There are laws that you have to abide by for employees. And then there's a special way of handling payroll and benefits. There, I highly recommend you get a company to assist you with payroll benefits and all, and collecting taxes and paying the employee taxes to DC government, because that's the report they're asking for, the documentation that you've done all of that in a timely manner and it's accurate. They want a list of current employees. They also want resumes of key personnel. And even in that list, they want home addresses, because here again, if you're making the argument that your 50% of your employees are from live in the district, they want to make sure to verify that information. And then if you have any partnership agreements, buyout rights, profit sharing agreements, any other agreements that oversee the operation of your business, they want to see copies of that as well. Any questions on that? I know that seems like a lot, but for many of you who are going to be like micro, small, and maybe have no employees or maybe just 1 or 2, this is definitely going to be a doable list, because this is stuff you have to have just to be in business anyway. So don't trip that it might seem like a lot. You will be able to generate this. Okay. Any thoughts, questions on that? Monica, anybody raise their hand? Okay, wonderful. So now, based upon, oh, I see a hand raised. Who's that? Miss Patrice?
Patrice.
Yeah, there you go.
Hello. Why, why would one choose an S corp?
The corporations have a certain tax benefit, and that so you're not taxed, you're taxed differently in corporation. Also, historically, it's LLCs have are more popular now than when they first started like 20-30 years ago. So corporations had an easier time to raise money because you can administer stock. And so if you would sell stock, you can get investments that way. And it was a much easier process than saying an LLC because you won't have stock. So it has far more tax benefits and separating the person from the business. But the LLC option has gained in popularity. It's proven itself in court. It is a viable option that I tend to advise people to start off with versus a corporation. It just has more complexity, but then it has more benefits. That's the biggest thing. And the biggest reason is taxes.
But that wouldn't be my concern unless I was making like 8 figures or something.
No. Yeah, you really need to think about what are you trying to do with the business. If you want to take on investors and you want to have a board that is going to be guiding the decision making and operating of the business, then you might, and you want to maximize the tax benefits of owning a business, then you might lean towards a corporation. Most people that I come across, and I don't want to presume your reasoning for starting a business, most people, the things they want to do with their business, the LLC works just fine. Also, if for some other reason your company really grows, you can always change from an LLC to a corporation. It's a lot of paperwork, and of course there's a fee, but it can be done. So there's nothing prohibiting you from eventually, if you need to transition to a corporation. But the complexity, I find, you have to be prepared for that level of complexity, because IRS looks at corporations differently than an LLC. Does that make sense to you? It doesn't matter the amount. It's just the legal status has different requirements.
It makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So you can still get your 8 figures with the LLC. Just don't forget about the little people like me when you blow up. That's all. That's all I ask. Okay. So now, based upon the other designations and categories you want to apply for during the CBE process, some of them may have additional documents that are required. So I made sure I just include a quick chart to highlight some of that information. So if you're going to be a disadvantaged business enterprise, they have a separate form that you have to complete, and it has to be notarized. You got to have a narrative about you and the business, and notice what it says here on business letterhead. So that takes us right back to our last discussion about your whole aesthetics of your business. What's the branding look like? This is where, because some people think letterheads are passe, but this is where it shows up. Again, you need your tax return. If you're going for the residency status, of course, they want proof of that residency status. You're going for the enterprise zone. You want to double check to make sure on their map, so I included the link here, that your business location does fall within that enterprise zone, because they do change, not every year or every day, but over time. Sometimes the enterprise zones do change. They have like a sort of like an expiration date. So you just want to double check to make sure you're using their map. If you're a longtime resident, again, they have identified they want 15 or 20 years of tax returns. That's a lot of information. Luckily, you can request transcripts from the IRS or the local tax office if you need that kind of documentation. So they want to make sure if you're going for long time, you've been in the district a long time. And then, of course, for veteran owned, they want documentation of your discharge or active duty from the Department of Defense. All right. So seems like a lot of documents, but in overall, the opportunity that you are afforded by being certified, This is nothing. Most of you have many of these items just in every day. Most of you keep your, I think the IRS recommends you keep your tax returns for like 7 years. You have that, you have copies of your bills, you know your location if you want to look up on the map. So don't think this is overwhelming. This is all very doable. Okay. Now, that's the getting certified process in a nutshell. You submit all your information. Is not an overnight process. It may take them weeks to months to go through it, depending on their load, depending on how complex your application may be, etc. So it's not like you submit and like next week they tell you you're certified. That's not how it happens. But you will get certified once you meet all the requirements. The challenge you have, and this is where a lot of business owners get frustrated and maybe give up, is now you got to find the contracts, because it doesn't mean the DC government or any government is going to run out and try to find you. That's not how it works. So the DC Office of Contracting and Procurement handles the procurement and contract processes for about 78 agencies, offices, and commissions in the district. They have a portal, and I provided you the link there, where you can see the available contracts that they are soliciting for. Okay, here's where it gets tricky. There are other DC government agencies and quasi-government agencies that have the authority to issue a contract or undergo procurement procedures. So not only do you have to check with the DC Office of Contract and Procurement, I suggest you sign up for their newsletter or whatever alert they have associated with the portal so you can get alerts of when they post a new contract. The thing is, you have to check all the other organizations, because this is where a lot of business owners get really frustrated, because they hear about somebody got awarded a contract and they never knew about it. And it came out of UEC or it came out of somebody else. That's because, and I included all the agencies here so you can see it. This is a partial list of all the contracting agencies that can solicit for a contract outside of using the Office of Procurement. Okay, this is what makes it challenging. So it is my recommendation, based upon the type of business you have, you just take a Saturday morning over the next month or so, and then you just sign up for the alerts or the newsletters for each of these agencies. One of the things you can do, if you use like a Gmail account, or you want to create another free account just for receiving alerts and newsletter, that way it doesn't fill up your main email account. That way you can take your you have a mechanism, a process of where you're checking for potential contracts that might fit your type of business. Okay, and so I also included the link for the longer list. But I know some of you are out there thinking, you know what, this is not for me. DC government wouldn't buy my type of goods and services. Since I knew some of you were thinking about that, I included is like 2 slides here of the 2020 spending. And they broke it down, and this is from DC government. They broke it down, their $864 million in spending that went towards CBEs, and they broke it down by types of goods and services. And as you take a look here, I'm gonna give you a minute to look at it, and there's one more slide to go with it. They buy everything from apparel to construction to educational, event planning. You got legal services, landscaping, food, gym and nutritional services. Somebody said they're doing the smoothie. Okay, I hope you see it up there. All right, manufacturing. There's a wide range of goods and services DC government spends money on. And just to highlight even more, that is not the extent of the list. And when you get the slides, you can go through it on your own. Here's the remainder of that list. And you can see you have your office supplies. I made sure to put this here because I know we have a couple of photographers here. I know we have a couple of real estate agents here. I know we have one company in safety and security. I think I heard somebody said they're in transportation. These are all on the list. And then there's either a category for other. So that could be a bucket of things that don't fall in the other categories. So the opportunity is huge if you decide to go into government contracting. Okay. It does take work because you have to find the contract. They might not always come to you. All right. You do have to network. You have to add that certification designation as part of your marketing mix. So if you're certified, whenever I see your marketing material, it should say you're certified. So people will know, oh yeah, that's another level of requirements that you have met. You got to have your stuff together. So it plays multiple roles in addition to providing you an opportunity to grow your business by receiving a contract from local government. Any thoughts, questions on that so far? And let me know if you need to flip back to the other side if everybody's double checking to see if they're on the list. Okay. Monica, I'm counting you to let me know if anybody's got their hand raised.
None yet.
Okay, great. All right. So here's the other little glitch I just want to highlight. There's another certification program that comes out of a DC government agency that's separate from small local business development office. And that is the certification program associated with DDOT. Okay. And I added that in here because it's separate. So if you apply for the CBE, it will not necessarily transfer over for opportunities under DDOT. And because DDOT oversees a lot of federal transportation projects, so they have their own. So this is their program helps you get contracts on the federal funded transportation projects in the District of Columbia or those associated with WMATA. So that's the metro in the entire greater Washington, D.C. area. And they buy a plethora of goods and services as well. So once you get into the groove of being certified, you want to see, because a lot of the application materials are pretty similar, you want to collect that information. So you also want to look at DDOT to see if you're eligible. And WMATA spends a lot of money. So I'm just saying. So you might as well take
There's
advantage.
a question. After 3
Sure.
years, can you reapply?
Yes, you have to recertify. And they have a whole process for that. So you can maintain it over time until you meet their cap. And so I think there's a total income range, but it's multi-millions of dollars or a personal wealth net worth that might disqualify you. But it's some ways up there that you can still qualify for a number of years. Okay. So that was just DC. There are several other certification and contracting programs to assist small businesses to get a bigger piece of the pie. So I'm just going to highlight a few. And like I say, many of the applications have the same kind of structure. So once you get prepared for one, you want to look to see what other else might fall in the same kind of bucket. Okay. So the U.S. Small Business Administration, the one that everybody knows about is probably the 8A Business Development Program. So they help develop you to get the larger federal government contracting. Okay. That is an elaborate process because they ask for a lot of documentation. Again, similar to SBE, but it's well worth it. But you have to network if you get into the program. Again, people don't sit around and come to you necessarily. They also have a couple of other designations. So they have a designation for women-owned small businesses, as well as those that are located in what we call hub zones. So you have enterprise zones, and then you also have hub zones. So those are historically underutilized business zones, and you can be in both. Sometimes the enterprise zones and hub zones do overlap. So that one is based upon the location of your business. And if I'm not mistaken, a good portion of DC is designated as a hub zone. I provided you the website where they break down the whole process for you. It's quite extensive, so just for the sake of time, I provided here. But one thing I wanted to remind you, if you're going to do federal contracting, you will not only need your DUNS number, the Dun and Bradstreet number, you will also need your SAM number. So the federal government has a system they call the System for Award Management. And so you have to be registered in that system, and they give you a number, and that allows you to submit for contracting applications. So you got to get a DUNS number, and then if you're going to do federal, you got to get a SAM number. Okay. All right. And here are about 6 other programs that I just had I found I wanted to highlight for you. So the Veteran Affairs has their own as well. So if you are service disabled, veteran-owned small business or veteran-owned small business. So they really want to support our military and former military folks who want to pursue entrepreneurship, and they have their own vehicle for that. The National Women's Business Council has a women-owned small business and economically disadvantaged women-owned small business certification. And this is non-governmental. It's a private organization, but they have gotten together. It's a really powerful kind of association for women in business, and they do their own certifications. The thing about the non-government certification is that other business types may use their certification in lieu of a government certification. So it's not like one is better than the other. They have different benefits that might help you with different customer groups. You have the National Minority Supplier Development Council. So they have their own certification for minority-owned businesses. There's a growing movement called the B Corp certification movement. And that's a slightly different kind of certification, because it's for-profit businesses, nonprofits are not eligible, that are driven by a social purpose, okay? And a lot of big corporations really like to choose those who have a social conscience, a social mission to the organizations they want to contract with. Their process is a bit different. It's not about just submitting your financials or your residency and all this kind of stuff. They're looking for, if you documented, your own process for vendor selection, your employees, do you have fair and equitable practices? So it's very interesting. It's worth taking a look at because it's a growing movement. And those companies that I've seen certified have performed very well in terms of financially. Then there's the National Gay and Lesbian Chamber of Commerce. They have their own certification for those entrepreneurs that are part of the LGBTQ plus community. And then lastly, I wanted to highlight, because I think this is an agency that doesn't get a lot of attention, the Minority Business Development Agency that is within the U.S. Department of Commerce. It's not a certification, but they have a center that assists small businesses to generate revenue from new markets, both domestically and globally. So they help you grow in a slightly different way. I highly recommend you sign up for their newsletter. They have a lot of resources they provide. And it forces you not just to think about, DC being your market. It opens you up that the rest of the country is your market, or even globally is your market. So please sign up for their newsletter. Any questions so far as we move on to another area? Because that's certifications in a nutshell. But anybody have any thoughts? So I want to close with this regarding the B2G business model, that why you should consider it. So many small business certifications are not only used by the federal, state, or local government, but they're also used by large corporations for contractors and purchasing. And in this kind of era of equity, a lot of corporations, their customers are asking, their boards are asking, how many small businesses do you work with? How many minority-owned businesses do you work with? So it has become increasingly more important, the certifications, not only for the government sector, but for the private sector. Also, to add to that, many large nonprofits, particularly if they receive government funding, sometimes they are also required to use small minority-owned businesses for their activities as well. And DC has a large number of large nonprofits that also spend a lot of money on goods and services. So that's another layer of benefit of being in a district. You not only have government, you not only have private corporations, but you have a significant nonprofit sector. I think you're one of the top 3 in the country in terms of the concentration of nonprofits. So it's another avenue. That's a B2B, but that's another avenue to grow your business. Okay. Any questions?
Patrice?
There you go. Go ahead, Ms.
Yeah.
Patrice. You might be on mute.
Hello, can you hear me?
Sure.
I saw with the CBEs that they were asking for a resume. Should the resume be reflective of what you want to do in the business, or should it just be?
It should be your
resume?
professional work. Your regular, like if you were applying for a job, but tailored to highlight your professional experience. Because they wanted to see, do you have the credentials, do you have the experience, and or do you have other skills to make you qualified to run this business? Because remember, they want you to be able to fulfill the contract if you are awarded.
Okay,
Yeah,
thanks.
no problem. Anybody else? I think we got a Miss Michelle.
Michelle?
Yes, thanks. I have a question. How long does it take for like the Small Business Association to get back with you for like your women-owned application and stuff like that?
Like that 8A?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It could be weeks to months. It's a really toss up.
All right. Thank you.
And the glitch nowadays is that the SBA is also very busy with all the COVID money and the grants and lending programs related to COVID. So sometimes the agencies get really busy. I know the IRS, they were behind a lot of work they do because of COVID relief packages. So it can really vary. Unfortunately, I don't have a straight answer for you on that one. So you can't put all your eggs in one basket to start. You gotta work the angles elsewhere. But great question.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. I think we got everybody.
Yes.
All right. Okay. So we have our basic business models. We went a little deep on the certification to benefit the B2G. But we're not forgetting about B2B and B2C. So now we're going to talk about some concepts regarding the customer and audience you need to keep in mind that will impact your possibilities for growth. Okay. So just so you have an illustration here, I'm gonna go back to the business life cycle. So when we talk about growth, we're talking about over time increase in sales. But you want to make sure with the increase of sales, you have an increase in profits. And the key to that is managing your costs. So this upward curve is what we're trying to get at, okay? And it's going to vary by industry and it's going to vary by business type. And let me warn you, rarely is it a straight line upward. So don't plan for that kind of growth. It usually does not happen. You can have a lot of customers in terms of growth, but that doesn't mean you have a lot of profits. So that's why I'm bringing that up. And it's the highlight of the next slide. So a few ways to look at growth. This is how I look at it because I focus a lot on the profit, okay? So growth, you can have a growth in a number of, I put in parentheses, in quotation marks here to emphasize the number of paying customers. And that can be both new and returning customers. So growth always starts with the customer. You got to get enough of them in the door that are going to pay, and which you collect timely and efficiently to have growth. The next level that I want you to think about in growth is growth in revenue. So the more customers you have that are paying, your revenue should go up. So that's money coming into the business from sales. It's the collected payments. So you want to think about the revenue amount per customer or the revenue amount per customer type. Okay. Because not every customer is the same, just like not every product or service you offer has the same level of sales or revenue or profit. Okay. And then the third component to think about for growth that you have to manage is growth in profit. And here is the difference between what the person pays, the collective customer pay in terms of revenue, and the net profit that business takes home after paying all of its expenses. So the most important factor you have to think about where your management skills have to come into play, you have to manage costs. Many businesses, they will expend a lot of money to acquire more customers. Yes, their revenue may go up, but their costs also go up. And as a result, they may not be generating the net profit that they need. So the key to remember that I like to focus on regarding growth is the value proposition. You have to offer and deliver the value to the customer so they're continuously coming in. If you have loyal returning customers, you spend less money on them, and so therefore your profits increase. Okay, so let's talk about that a little bit. So here are some key concepts to think about for your business regarding the customer. These are big concepts, and they usually have their own training seminar or session, but we're going to try to get them down and quickly in the next 10 to 15 minutes. So I did narrow them down to the basic elements. So first, the customer has the job, pains, and gains. You have to think about the customer's buying center, their customers on a journey, and there's the marketing sales funnel. So let's go through these really quickly. Before I start, anybody have any questions so far and how we are looking at growth? Monica, do you see any hands raised? I'm just making sure.
I see no hands
Okay, wonderful. Okay,
and nothing in the chat.
wonderful. Oops. All right. So every customer or customer group, whether you're dealing with B2G, B2B, or B2C, customers have a job to get done, either in their work or in their lives. Okay. And while they're doing their job or trying to get it done, they either encounter pains or they want certain gains from doing what they need to get done. So what ends up happening is that the customer is buying or values products and services that you make that makes their job easier. Okay. So their jobs can fall into three buckets. You have the personal and emotional. People buy to fulfill emotional needs, whether it is I want to feel special with this product. If I want to feel a sense of prestige, I want to feel a sense of relief that this got done because I bought a particular service. So believe it or not, you are in the emotion feeling business when you're running a business. Because at the end of the day, it's all about how the customer feels. The other elements of the jobs you may need to consider. Some people, the job is social. So it's they want to look good or gain power or status as a result of your product or service. And then the easiest job to think about is the functional job. Customers are trying to perform or complete a task or solve a specific problem. So if you're a photographer, a functional job that the customer may be going through is like, if I'm a small business owner and I might need photographs or headshots for my website. That's a problem. Now I got to figure out who do I go to get those done. They need to be done well, and I might want them to highlight or have a particular background because I want to feel more and get the importance of that we're a prominent, important company. So I might have a social function, and it might be completely emotional because I want to present in the best professional light. And so you have to think about the job your product or service is fulfilling. How is it making that person's life easier? If it is not, then you don't really have a valuable product or service. The other element is the customer pains. So anything that annoys your customer before, doing, or after trying to get the job done. So if I'm an entrepreneur, I need photographs, I need headshots, me and my staff. What would be the pain points for me to get that done? I could do it with my cell phone. I need to get a, I need to have an iPhone that has the best camera. I need a certain lighting. I need a clean background. And then I want to have a certain backdrop of the city. So I need to get the software that can input all that. All of that are challenges to get a decent headshot done. So a photographer who has that experience, who has the software, as well as have all the backdrop, that is the product and service that they're offering that will solve that person's problem and alleviate that pain. And the pain could be undesired outcomes, problems, obstacles, or even risk of doing business or getting the job done. So there are various categories of pains that your products could be addressing. And the last one it's a little more difficult to wrap your head around, and that's the gains. So that's the desired outcomes and benefits the customer wants. And it's 4 layers of the gains. And I put them here just so you can kind of distinguish what your product may be offering. So there's the required gains. So these are gains without which the solution wouldn't work. So it's the bare minimum your product has to offer. So for the example here of a smartphone, even though we talk about a smartphone has all the apps, it should be able to make a call, because at the end of the day, it is a phone. So that's the bare minimum requirement. The expected gain. So it's just a little layer above required, some basic gains that we expect from a solution, even if it could work without them. So a smartphone who can make a call, but it would be great if it's a smartphone that looks really good. So here comes the iPhone. The iPhone looked good. Even if you didn't know all that it was capable of doing, it just looked the part, okay? Another type of gain is the desired gain. So here you're going beyond what is expected. So using the cell phone analogy again, so it should be able to make a call, expected gain, which it should look nice. I don't want to carry on a big ugly thing. And then a desired gain is like, it may be able to integrate with the other software I might have on my computer. I might, can it be the remote control for my TV? So it does all these other things separate from its main purpose that gives me a delight. Then I'm like, oh yeah, I can check my email that normally I have to log into my computer. I can sync my emails up. Isn't that great? And the last gain is the unexpected gains. These where you go beyond the expectations. And this is where you get that higher level of innovation. Because before the Apple brought out the touchscreens in the App Store, they were unheard of beforehand. Yes, there were a lot of cell phones before then, but they added a layer of innovation that we couldn't even imagine we needed a touch phone, or that we needed an app store to add more software to our phone. We couldn't even imagine that. But if you're thinking about the customer and what they do on a daily basis, then you start to add other aspects to your products and services that will benefit the customer, and therefore you increase the customer loyalty. Any questions on the jobs, pains, and gains? That's a lot of information, I know. Okay. So here's, I just wanted to illustrate how, as you're reviewing your products and services and how they can provide either a pain reliever or gain creator to the customer, there's a value proposition canvas, so to speak. It's a little diagram like this where you can write out your products and services. And for each product, you write out what are the pain relievers and what are the gain creators. And then for each customer group, each one is different. So you will do a separate one for the government, for the businesses, for the consumer. You write out the jobs they typically need to get done. You write their pains and gains, and then you try to match up what your product will offer that will please the customer. Here's the trick to matching your value proposition to the customer. You don't have to relieve all the pains or create all the gains. That's the beauty of this. You can get really creative if you satisfy or can solve a really big pain. That can be the value proposition all on its own. Or if you solve maybe two pains and one major gain, that can be the value proposition. So there is no limit on how you construct your product and services to meet the customer's needs. Okay, so this is where your entrepreneurial mindset, your creativity really comes into place. And if you think about it that way, you can see how this matches up to your strategy, because this is where you become different. This is where you differentiate yourself in the industry, because you're not just producing just what everybody else in the industry does. You really study the customer and you come up with a package that really solves the customer's problem. Okay. Any questions on that? Thoughts, feedback?
No questions, no hand raised so far.
Wonderful. Okay, so that's value proposition. That's either going to fulfill a gain, reduce a pain, and overall fulfill a customer job or make their job easier. One element I want to introduce here that you don't hear a lot about is understanding the concept of the buyer center or the buying center. And it's the buyers is a group of employees, family members, or members of an organization that are responsible for finalizing major purchase decisions. This is especially important for B2G and B2B because there are a number of people, usually with organizations, whether it's government or private sector, and sometimes, and even in family units, and even if you're selling to consumers, but you're selling to maybe the mother or the father of a particular target within a family, there are different people involved in the decision making. So there are 6 basic roles that I've highlighted here. You have the initiators. So those are the ones who say, you know what, we need to do this or that. You have the influencers. Those are the ones who give input if we should choose a particular product or service. You have the deciders. So they're the ones who ultimately make the decision if we're going to go ahead and make a purchase. You have the actual buyers. So they're the ones who actually carry out the buying process. And in government and many businesses, the deciders and buyers can be 2 separate different people. They can be 2 separate different departments. And this is why it's so challenging to sell to the larger entities. But if you understand this concept, you can design how to get her to make this work in your favor. You have the end users. So those are the people who actually use the products once it's been purchased. And so they could be the person who didn't initiate buying a new product or service. And sometimes you get conflict in organizations because if you recall from your job, this is how come you got a new software you got to use. And you're like, well, what happened to the last software? Because somebody else initiated, somebody else made the decision, somebody else bought it, and now you got to use it. Okay. And then you have the gatekeepers. So those are the folks who control the information going through the different roles and throughout the entire process. So many times when you're trying to deal with the government or businesses, you want to try to network to get to the gatekeepers because they're the ones that kind of let you know, okay, yeah, we will be buying new software in the next year. Oh yeah, we'll put an RFP out on the street or solicitation pretty soon. And so they have a lot of the information you would like to know that to help you figure out when is somebody, an agency might be interested in buying a product and service. Does anybody have any thoughts on these basic rules of the buying center? Does this sound familiar from your job or even in your family, in your household, or who makes the decision and who actually pays for it and who actually uses it?
It does.
Anybody else? So we got one, I do.
Nicole said yes.
Okay. So if you understand this and you have a goal to do B2G, it will change your whole mindset of how you approach a government agency and even how you write your proposal. Okay. All right. So we talked about value proposition and the fit with the customer, because you're gonna understand the customer and their jobs, their pains, their gains. We just talked about the buying center, and that it may be a whole bunch of people involved in the whole process of you getting your product and service into particularly an organization. The other concept I wanted to highlight is the customer decision journey, or the customer journey mapping. There are various variations on the naming of this. So I'll go through this. This is usually talking about an individual, but could also be applied to a business or a government agency, and you'll start to pick up where there's overlap in the concepts that we've talked about earlier. So this maps out the steps someone or an agency may go through to make a decision on a product or services, and you have done this, and this is something we should all relate to. Okay, so somewhere in our lives or in the lives of an agency, there's something that triggers a problem, and you become aware of a problem. So this is the first stage. You have an awareness. There's problem recognition, and so that person starts looking around for options of how do I solve this problem. Okay, that goes back to the customer jobs and their pains and their gains. Nowadays, if we have a problem, we do a Google search or we call somebody. That goes back to the buying center, because we might call an influencer, like, how do I solve this? What do I need to do for this? So you go from awareness, and then you go into a consideration and active evaluation phase. So here you're looking at different options. So this is when we go to Amazon, and then we go to Best Buy, and then we might go to Staples, and we're looking at the prices and the descriptions of maybe the same product, and we're weighing our options. We're saying, okay, who has free shipping? How much each one costs? And does Amazon have it cheaper? And we might go back and forth for a while in this stage, but we're trying to seek and assess value. I'm trying to figure out, if I'm price conscious, which one is going to get my job solved, but give me the best, be at the best price. Okay. Next, you're going to go through acquisition. Here is where you make the decision. You say, okay, I'm going to buy it from Amazon, and you make the purchase, and the business collects its money. That's the first part of the customer customer decision journey. So this is pre-purchase steps that the person goes through. I highlight here the touch points, because every business wants to try to get in front of that customer. You can have a different message at each stage to try to convince them to choose your business. Many businesses forget about the post-purchase experience, okay? Because after I made a payment, the process doesn't stop. So you collect the money from the customer. You then have to still deliver the product and services. The customer still has to use the product and service. Sometimes they might return it, okay? And then they have to figure out, do they need any supplement or maintenance for that product or service? And then sometimes they have to dispose of it. So if it comes in a lot of packaging, I got to figure out how to get rid of it. That is all part of the customer experience. So as a small business owner, you want to think about these steps and think about the customer's jobs, pains, and gains, and figure out, how can I make any of this easier for the customer so they'll choose you to buy the product or service. So the last concept is, I'm going to layer that customer journey map on top of what we call the marketing sales funnel. So here you have the journey, right? I put it on the side here just to let you know, instead of being horizontal, I laid it out vertically. And then I laid out the marketing sales funnel. This is to illustrate is that you start off with a wide group of potential customers. So that's the potential market opportunity. So those are the suspects in the marketplace, in DC, in the DMV. They're unidentified individuals looking for the product or service. So they're in the awareness stage. They have a problem. They're like, okay, I need to figure out what to do. And so you, with your touch points, They're either going to connect with you and become a prospect. And that's when they become a prospect, when they either provide you one method of communication. So this is why every website has like a newsletter sign up or some sort of email list you can sign up, or they want you to follow. Because once that customer has initiated that action with you, they have some interest in your products and services. They're not buying it yet. They're still considering their options, but they have an interest. And you want to have a mechanism for them to reach you. The next is respondent and a lead. So these are the individuals that are engaging you. So they might have comments on your social media. They might actually email you with questions. They might hit you up on Messenger. They might even can send you a product and put it in the cart and get to the checkout page. They might even request from you, hey, can you send a proposal? Can you give us a quote on this product and service? They might do all of that. That's a lead. So they're the closest to being a potential customer, but that's not that's not where you win yet. They're still considering other options. So at any point in time, they can abandon this. This is where you've been shopping online. You put something in the cart and you say, oh, I changed my mind. That's the stage you're in. You're a potential, but for some reason you didn't move all the way through. It's only at the customer stage when they actually execute on the payment, on the contract, that they become a customer. So I put an example of what your touch points might be at each of these stages. And the reason why we use a funnel, because it's to illustrate that your potential market might be thousands of people, right? But by the time you get to the customer stage, you might be only dealing with tens or hundreds of people. So you got to make sure your starting stage is wide enough, or you have very precise marketing material and marketing message, and clearly communicating your value. So out of whatever this large group of people is, you can get enough at the end of the day to give you growth in sales, growth in revenue, growth in profit. And then lastly, after the purchase, the funnel flips around, because now you're focusing on customer retention. You have your product delivery, your product use, your supplement or your maintenance, and you have your after use disposal. And at the end, you're building up your customer base. So the base should get wider. And it's because of your customer service, the delivery, the use, the maintenance, after use, you're building up a loyal following of customers, because that entire process has provided a value to the customer. So it is either making their job easier by reducing their pain or giving them a gain, or you have manipulated the buying center and you've spoken to all the folks in the different roles. So they understand the value from their perspective that allows you to work from your pre-purchase phase to your post-purchase phase. Okay, and this is where a lot of businesses forget to think about the post-purchase, because this is where you ultimately build the customer base. Okay, so as an extra couple of slides, I just included here how you can think about that experience and some elements you can use to kind of get better at it, because you don't start off perfect, but you want to start off the best way you can. So there's 7 basic factors you can think about your experience. 1, is it useful? Is the experience usable? Is it findable, credible, desirable, accessible, and or valuable? Many small business owners are challenged with, sometimes they have an excellent product, excellent service, but it's hard to reach you. You're not accessible. It's hard to find you. So, the website, you might have a website, you might not have a website. Sometimes it's hard to verify if you're credible. So that certification you got, that's going to add to your credibility. And then sometimes you have a great product or service, but it's not packaged in a way that makes it desirable. Remember, you talked about the smartphone and the aesthetics. So you got to think of all of these elements that will enhance your customer experience, that makes them fall in love with you and always want to buy that particular product or service from your business. So in the remainder slides, I just broke down some additional information for you. You can read that on your own, just so you get greater clarity. And as we are right on time, we end with the takeaway. Small business certification is a strategic asset for growth. You need to map your value proposition for each customer group. That's another area that small businesses try to lump everybody together. Don't break it out. It's time consuming, but break it out. Map the entire customer journey and see where you can add value. So you know you have a good product and services, but you want to make sure the experience adds to it. And then you want to make sure you design the experience that enhances the value. And you're always going to consider the buyer center along with that experience. So that's today's presentation. That was a lot covered. I'm wide open for any questions, comments, issues, whatever you need.
I need help with sales funnels.
Okay, we'll make a one-on-one appointment and we can sit down and start to sketch out your sales funnel for your business. So not a problem. So when you get the slides, read through it. I provided some links to some other resources. Just take a look at it. And then when we meet one-on-one, we can start to sketch out what yours look like. You can start sketching it out yourself. And then we can go through it to see if it makes sense for your business and where you can improve. So yeah, we got you on that one.
Thanks.
That sound like a plan?
Absolutely. Thank you.
There you go. Thank you. Anybody else? See, there's a lot of discussion in the chat. Just making sure nobody has questions or concerns. So I'd like to thank our sponsors. So the small and local business development, the agency, they actually help make sure this boot camp happens. So DC government is supporting you. They're really behind you, as well as the DC Housing Community, DHCD. And so that is session 3. And the last session, we're gonna bring all this together and talk about the money, talk about continuity and how COVID has impacted you, and how do you move forward. Okay, so all this comes together with session 4. Any other questions, comments? We're right on time. I can stick around a few more minutes if anybody has any questions, thoughts, or feedback. Are y'all excited yet?
Yes.
Okay, great, because I'm trying to have some smoothies. I'm gonna need a
Travel.
photographer because I got some products coming out later to see. I'm need a photographer. If I ever buy a house for the lawn, I'll holler at you with a landscaping, or trying to think the level up lady. We gonna meet later because she got a thing going. I see you got an IT consultant. I might need you later. A lot of people need IT nowadays, so I gotta be good to y'all because y'all got stuff I need later. Well, everybody, we all need. So
Thank you,
Monica, I'll
guys.
turn it
I
back to
placed
you.
BP's link in the chat for the one-on-one sessions.
And if you
look
don't
for
see
the-
any, I'm sorry, Monica, not to interrupt.
No worries.
If you don't see any dates, just email me directly, and I will get you on my schedule. Not a problem. I just put a few dates on there, and I'll be adding more dates later on this week as I know my August schedule. Okay, so don't worry, we'll get you in. Sorry, Monica, you can go ahead.
No, that's it. Thursday session is coming up at 6 o'clock. Don't forget to join at 5:30, early as 5:30 if you want to network with each other. I'll be on at 5:30, and we'll probably get started about 6:10 like we did for every other session.
Okay.
All right. Have a good evening, everyone. And thanks
Thank you.
again.
Thank you very
Excited to
much.
see you guys on Thursday.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so
both.
much. Take
Thank you.
care.
You're welcome. Great to see you guys.
Bye.
Okay.